everybody, and welcome to the Heartline. Today we are going to be doing a review of Diamondback at Kings Island. I hope you enjoy this video, and let's begin. Diamondback at Kings Island is a B&M hypercoaster that opened back in 2009. This coaster reaches a max height of 230 feet and a top speed of 80 miles per hour along over 5,000 feet of track. Diamondback is one of my all-time favorite roller coasters and is one of the best rides at Kings Island. One thing that sets this coaster apart from other B&M hypercoasters is the fact that it uses the extra long trains with staggered seating instead of the traditional trains, which I personally love because it allows you to get lots of extra whip over that first drop if you're sitting in the back row. It also offers a better view than you would normally get from the old B&M hypercoaster trains, as the trains are much more spread out, giving you a better view for most of the ride. For this review, I'm going to be ranking several key aspects of Diamondback's ride experience, such as the theming and presentation of the ride, the overall layout, the operations, and then finally, I'm going to give the ride an overall score out of 10. First off, we're going to be starting off with Diamondback's presentation. This ride has a very loose Western theme, but aside from that, this ride does not really have any theming to speak of. However, it does still look very nice, and a few years ago, both the track and supports were repainted, so it looks very nice and fresh. Now, the ride's trains are also pretty nicely maintained, and the queue line is usually very clean and has plenty of trash cans. Overall, Diamondback's queue line is not very interesting, but at least it has several shading canopies that can protect you from the sun on a hot day. I also really like how Diamondback goes over the entrance path to Rivertown, and it is very cool having the interaction of the trains going over your head as you enter and exit the area of the park. Also, you can't talk about the presentation of Diamondback without mentioning the iconic splashdown. This ride ends with a beautiful water break in a pond near one of the paths in Rivertown, and it sends up a massive splash every time a train goes past, which provides a great photo opportunity. This ride goes pretty light on the theming, but I still think it overall has a decent presentation. I would give this ride's presentation score a 6 out of 10. I can't really put the score any higher than this because it does not have a lot of theming, but it is still a pleasant ride to look at and be around. Next, we're going to be talking about Diamondback's ride experience. Diamondback delivers a long and comfortable ride with plenty of airtime that begins with a climb up a 230-foot lift hill. Diamondback's first drop delivers tons of airtime for riders in all rows. Although for this drop, I really prefer it in the back row because you get absolutely yanked over the first drop with these super long trains and you're out of your seat the whole way down. But no matter which seat you sit in, you'll get tons of airtime over this drop as you dive over the entrance pathway to Rivertown. You then rise up into one of Diamondback's many airtime hills, and this one is probably my personal favorite moment on the ride. You are out of your seat for so long on this hill. And if you are sitting in the back row, then you are out of your seat for most of the drop down this hill. But if you're sitting in the front row, then you will get more airtime over the crest of the hill. No matter where you sit, though, I would say the airtime borders on ejector sometimes. And it is an absolutely amazing moment on this ride. After this hill, you enter another Camelback hill. This one does not have quite as much airtime as the first one, but it does still deliver some great airtime for riders in all rows. After this hill, you then hit a hammerhead turnaround that sends you back towards the start of the ride. By this point, you are pretty far away from the rest of the park, and you get some really cool visuals of the other coasters, such as the Beast and Orion. Now, some people do complain about a rattle on Diamondback. Overall, though, I would say this is a pretty smooth coaster, but this next valley between the turnaround and the next airtime hill is definitely the rattliest moment on the ride, but I would still say it's nothing unbearable, just a little uncomfortable. This next hill, though, is very fun, although not quite as good as the other two, because there is a trim brake on it, although it usually does not hit too hard, so it's not that big of a deal. After this hill, though, you complete a turn and rise up into the mid-course brake run for this coaster. This mid-course brake run is a little bit of a buzzkill, but I don't think that it hits quite as hard as the mid-course brake run on some other hypercoasters. And you do get a bit of floater airtime on the drop off the brake run if you're closer to the back row, before you take two smaller hills, although these ones unfortunately do not have too much airtime because you are traveling at a slower speed. And then after these hills, you navigate a helix, which provides some nice visuals over the pathways in Rivertown before diving into one of the ride's signature elements, the splashdown finale. Also, if you are sitting in one of the back rows, you might be able to reach out your hand and get some mist from the water. But aside from that, you're not going to get wet from this, so you don't have to worry about that if you don't like water. After the splashdown, you then rise up into the ride's final brake run, ending your journey of over 5,000 feet of track. Overall, this is a very solid ride, providing tons of airtime as well as a decently long ride experience. And while it does not have a ton of positive G's, there are a few moments of positives in the valleys in this coaster. Also, one thing you might not notice unless you look at the ride more closely is this is actually a terrain coaster. The part of this ride that is away from the main part of the park follows several large hills and valleys, and I feel like it really helps add to this ride's character. I really like this coaster more than the other B&M hypers in the Cedar Fair chain, and I feel like part of that is the fact that they just changed up this layout a bit to make it a little more interesting. For Thunderstriker and Behemoth, the other two B&M hypers in the former Cedar Fair chain, they have very straight layouts, with just perfectly straight lines of airtime hills, but the hills in Diamondback are a bit more curved, and the layout is a little more interesting. I think part of that is because of how it uses the terrain to its advantage. I think overall I'm going to give Diamondback's ride experience a 9 out of 10. This really is a great coaster, and I love riding it over and over again when I'm at Kings Island. We are now going to be moving on to the final category for this review, and that is Diamondback's operations. I would say as a whole, Kings Island has some of the best operations I've ever seen in a park before, and Diamondback is no exception. In fact, I would say that Diamondback routinely has one of the best ride crews in the whole park. And this ride churns out trains, and I often see the ride not stacking, which is great. And this line always moves very quickly, and it gives you lots of opportunities to ride this great coaster. Also, the ride crew is very nice and friendly, and if you're nice to them, there's a chance they might give you a very loose lap bar, increasing the amount of airtime you get. Overall, I would say that Diamondback's ride crew is pretty equivalent in operations and friendliness to the ride crew at Fury 325, which is why I'm giving Diamondback's operations a perfect 10 out of 10. And now for Diamondback's final score. With a nice appearance, amazing ride experience, and a stellar ride crew, I'm going to give this coaster a 9 out of 10. I think that this is definitely one of the best coasters at Kings Island and is one of my favorite rides overall. So anyway, those are my thoughts on Diamondback at Kings Island. I would love to hear your guys' thoughts down in the comments, and I want to see if you guys like this coaster as much as I do. But anyways, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it and have a great day. This is the Heartline, signing off. Peace.